Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with the senior pastor of the New Life Covenant Church, Bishop Tudor Bismark. Bishop Tudor Bismark, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Oh, thank you, Trevor. Thank you very much for having me. I'm so honored and so delighted to be here with you in this august interview. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Congratulations. It's a big day for you and your wonderful wife, Chichi. You are celebrating 38 years of marriage. How have you done that?
Well, we met in 1978, wanted to get married in 1980. We were a bit too young. And then my sister passed away in September 81. So we moved the wedding from October 81 to the 20th of February 82. And it just seems like yesterday. I'm the old guy, but she's still the teenager. That was 38 years ago.
That's a great achievement, Bishop, given the attack that marriages of men and women of God are experiencing. What's been the formula for you guys sticking it out?
Basically, the first year we were married was love and roses and so on. And then we had our first major disagreement. And the D word was thrown in, I want a divorce. And then we vowed from that day, December 1982, we'll never use that word again, never ever. And whatever we go through, we'll work it out. And then we also began to find responsible counselors and people that could guide us and advise us. We've had ups and downs like everybody else, but we've committed to a lifetime relationship being together.
What advice do you give to couples going through stormy territories as far as marriage is concerned?
Well, life is really unpredictable. No matter where you are in the world, it's just terribly unpredictable. And so firstly, in premarital counseling, when we get to do it, I don't do that much anymore, we go through the vows and we deal with the for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. We deal with those actual dynamics, what that means, and to take that commitment very seriously. If you're dealing with moral issues and moral failure, it's not impossible to work through. It becomes challenging, but we've encouraged people to work through those. We've not been in that area of challenge, but we've helped couples survive and work through those kinds of things. We also, for me, I've always said I always want my children to respect their mom and to honor their mom, and I wouldn't want to put their mother through a difficult time. And that's been basically a compass and a guideline for me.
It's awesome. Let's go to the beautiful people that brought you to this world, your mom and dad. Your dad was a musician. And interestingly, your mother was a Muslim prior to getting married to your father. Share this, your journey.
Well, on dad's side, my granddad, Grandpa Bismarck, was actually, their name was Bismarck Petit. They immigrated when he was a little boy into Malawi, in the Mlanje area. We're told, we got some documentation to say that they owned tea estates. His parents died when he was a little boy, and they lost those tea estates based on the executors of the will. They then came to Rhodesia. He married my grandmother, my dad's real mom, who was from Kimberley, South Africa, settled in Bulawayo. And my dad's mom passed away giving birth to Uncle Peter. My dad was 2 or 3 years old. Grandpa then remarried and had a number of children from his second wife, Granny Bismarck, who passed away a few years ago. And my dad settled in the Bulawayo area, became an apprentice working with the upholstery, finally got a job on the railways, but his pastime was playing music and the saxophone. That whole bunch were 2 families, one of 17 kids. On my mother's side, my grandfather was born in Surat in India. And way back then, the Brits were looking for Indians to come and work in the cane fields, and didn't do well. Moved to Botswana, where he met my grandmother, who's Tswana. My mother was born in Francistown with most of her sisters, one of 13 children, one mother, one father. Moved to Bulawayo because there were so many opportunities back then. The old man got a farm, was ranching, was doing chebe, that's river sand, buses, trucks, sour milk, all of that. And my mom and dad met. She went to a dance. He was playing in the band. Eyes fell on each other. Married in 56, May the 5th, 1956. I was born 1957.
How was it like growing up? Talk to me about a young Tudor Bismark. Did they ever spank? What's the most stupid thing that you ever did?
Well, I was very traumatized as a boy. I went to school, started in Tranance School. I had just turned 5. The 5th of January is a tough time. I should have spent another year at home, but my dad got a job working on the railways, and they were laying track from what is now Rutenga to Triangle. There were no shops out there. There were no roads. And so my dad had to put me with relatives to go to school. I didn't understand it. My sister, Bernie, who comes after me, was put with another relative. And then in the 3rd year, when my brother Donovan, who was 1959, had to go to school, they couldn't put him in another relative, so they then sent us to Zimbabwe mission, which was so traumatic. And
why was it traumatic?
Well, the thing is that we'd never been in an environment. When you go to a boarding school, you have to have somebody that can protect you, look after you, fight for you. I had no idea that happened. In my first fight, I was pulling Michael Holmes' hair. I thought that's how you fight, because that's how I fought with my sisters. And he bust me in the eye. And but then you learn very quickly.
So you get a blow in your eye. Traumatizing experience.
It did. I mean, you learn quickly in boarding school, and then you learn how to defend yourself. But again, Zimbabwe grew me up really quickly.
In what way?
Well, it made me appreciate, number one, values, appreciate home, life, family, because I met a lot of kids there that were on welfare. They were taken away from broken families. Some were orphans. I got to appreciate that. I also got a tremendous grounding in terms of education, because the Catholic school, mostly Irish and British nuns, who were so anti-Rhodesian Front, disliked Ian Smith, disliked apartheid, and put in us, actual values, etc., and the value of education. So when I left Zimbabwe and went to Founders High School, we were literally 2 classes ahead in education.
When, where, and how did Jesus Christ find you?
I had a basic experience at 8 years old, being from a subliminal Muslim family, because my mother wasn't thorough practicing. But in Zimbabwe, the kids were getting for her first Holy Communion, and my sister and I and my brother were the only ones that didn't take Holy Communion, because we didn't go for the training. And so I then asked my parents if I could. They said no, but I could serve in the altar. But there was this appetite for being a Christian. My mom then, who began to seek, and based on our experience at school, befriended the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in Botswana, who said your children need to be confirmed. And so we then started getting training in the Anglican Church. And I was confirmed at the age of 12. But then when I was 16, my parents were having such trauma in their marriage. 10 children. My dad was in the band again, drinking again, going crazy again. And my mom was done. That particular day when she was leaving with all 10, some missionaries were doing door knocking. Robin Ferris and Louis Lowe knocked on the door. Robin was from Austin, Texas, just came off LSD and heroin drugs. They sent him far away. The first family they invited to church was my mom and dad.
Wow.
Took us to church. We felt the anointing. My mom spilt her guts on the marriage. I'm like, what's wrong with you? You know, why are you telling your business here? But in a very short space of time, we started attending church. That was in 1972. And then in 1974, I started preaching, became the leader of Scripture Union, started preaching there. And then in 1978, got my first license to legitimately preach for the organization I was with.
What was the music in your father? Did it was it passed on to you, the DNA
It
for
was.
music?
There was no music in the church. So the missionary she was basically the missionary's wife, Susan Ferris, her name was. She was pulling a piano accordion. We already had a piano in the house because my dad had bought one for us. And so my sister was playing piano. I started playing guitar. I was playing for the band in Founders. I played sax, flute, clarinet, and so on. I took O-level music. My sister took O-level music, A-level music. So music was already in our family. And now that the church needed musicians, we came in as a family band.
Wow. So you played as a family band for the church?
For the church, yes.
And speak to me about the most powerful sermon that you've ever preached.
Well, that's a tough call. You know, I think there are basically, Trevor, seasons in which things happen. The first message I ever preached in South Africa defined some of my journey. My message was entitled, that was in 1978, God, the Supreme Man Builder. And that's when we began to, you know, play around with empowerment and Black Cushite message, Pan-Africanism. And then in 1990, in Dallas, in England, preached another very significant message, and that was on Rebecca, and that even though you're an outsider, you have a right, you know, to inheritance. That was 1990. And then for me, the breakthrough came in 2001, preaching for Bishop T.D. Jakes at the Pastors Leaders Conference. The message was entitled, The Blessing of 1,000 Times More. All of those messages in those decades defined my life, my ministry, and my future. So probably The Blessing of 1,000 Times More is probably the most powerful and the most outstanding.
What was the response to that message?
Well, again, we couldn't anticipate. It wasn't my preferred message that night. It was something different. It was almost an accident. I read Deuteronomy 1 verse 11, where Moses says, God has blessed you, and the blessing of 1,000 times more be on you. And then I heard like a sonic boom. I thought there was a problem with the microphone, and the Holy Spirit said, no, it's not the sound, it's me. And then shockingly, I saw hundreds and hundreds of people. There must have been about 10,000 people in that auditorium, mostly pastors, running to the front and throwing money, checks. I was wearing an African kente print garment. The reason for that, I'd been preaching a few weeks in the States. I had no clothes, my clothes in the laundry. They hadn't come back. And I thought, okay, let me just put this on. And it was a mistake. And people thought this was brilliant, that I was Pan-Africanist, and it was all a mistake. And that day, when people were throwing money, I thought Bishop Jakes was offended because nobody had seen this before. I was panicking, but it was just a moment. It was just an absolute moment. And I became known as the guy that preached the blessing of 1,000 times more. In that message, as the weeks went by, videos went out. And the thing about it was, a month before, the Twin Towers were bombed, 9/11. And so Bishop was taking a chance on that meeting. Pastors came believing in Bishop Jakes. Before I spoke, there was a feed from President Bush to thank the pastors for defying the terrorists and traveling and so on. And after President Bush was Bishop Jakes introducing me. And President Bush said, I'll be watching the meeting. So I was like, oh my God. Wow. So it was a stunning moment. And a lot of pastors knew me from that moment. Still today, people refer back to that particular incident and moment.
Awesome. To talk to us about the ups and downs of building this amazing church that you have built now, the presence that you have in Zimbabwe, particularly on the continent. But let's start with Zimbabwe. How has that challenge been? The journey? How has the journey been?
1980, Cheech and I went to Houston. We weren't married. We were about to. my missionary's son, Regan Latter, was getting married, and we shared a bedroom because I lived with him here for 4 years. He asked me to be his best man. And so we went to Houston, and I had a strange visitation there. We were offered to live in America, get married, live there, go to college, and this is definitely God. But I had a visitation, supernatural visitation, go back to Zimbabwe. I was like, you go back to Zimbabwe, you know. The country had just become independent. People weren't really sure on what Robert Mugabe was going to do. He had won a huge majority, which was stunning. Many people don't have this conversation that 20% of the parliament had to be whites, 1/5 that was part of the Lancaster Agreement. So his hands were tied. But again, a bit of a loose gun. Nobody knew what he would do. They thought he might go some more on Mashal way. And I was like, I'm not going back to Zimbabwe. We have a great opportunity here. But Gigi said, we need to go back. And when I agreed to, I had this dream, which was so poignant, that I would build a church that had at least 10,000 people and a building to go with it. And at that time, there were very few churches anywhere that had more than a couple of thousand people. And so some people, accuse me of egotism and narcissism and whatever the case might be. But we held on to that, and we anchored with that and remained even after challenges that came in the 90s and then 2000s. We built our entire idea and thought around that visitation from God that we ought to be here and remain here. There had been many opportunities to leave. We refused to leave. We have committed to being in Zimbabwe and remaining here.
What's a day like in the life of Bishop Tudor Bismark? What's your day like?
Again, before the mid-90s, I was having just a general day, office boy, going early in the morning. But I said I would not turn 40 without an earned degree. And so 1997, coming towards 40, I went back to school and earned my degree. And because there was dial-up, internet was just coming and perfecting and so on, I had to use the dial-up thing with the phone line. And so I had to come early so I could get a decent signal and stuff like that. So I would start coming to the office about 2 in the morning. And then it just became a lifestyle and a habit. So now I get up about 10 to 4. I leave the house about 4:15. And every day religiously, including today on our anniversary, I was at the office at 4:45.
Wow.
And go through emails, go through schedules, things I have to do, appointments. Certain days it's study time. And then I start meeting people from probably 8 to about 1, 2. And then prepare for whatever I'm doing in the evenings. Fairly regimented. In that time is specific reading. It's not random. It's specific reading. So I'm right now doing leadership. So January into March is leadership. April into June is finance. And then anything from August, I start reading probably into relationship building, team building, etc. Church stuff, how to build churches. And then from October, I have maybe 2 or 3 novels that I read,
I know you visit you visit families in the evening. Share that experience with us.
Well, Trevor, people say I'm a great pastor. I'm not. I'm an awful pastor. I'm never home. I get people to do the pastoring side. And so I committed last year. I just wanted to be home. And so while I'm home, most of the people I'm meeting in the day are basically relational.
Okay.
In the evenings, I'm now visiting families.
Okay.
Going to see where they live, eat what they eat. I don't want them to do anything special. And I've seen some guys that are literally building from the ground up, living in a little back room, and building their house, hugging their kids and encouraging where they are. Our family last week didn't want me to come to their house because they had just laid tiles. The roof wasn't up. It had been raining. I said, no, I'm coming. They want to take me to some restaurant. I said, no, I'm coming. And the children, oh, Bishop, Bishop. We wouldn't have seen that at a restaurant. And I'm hugging their kids and eating what they're eating and feeling for them, praying for their breakthrough, and trying to feel what Zimbabweans are feeling right now, their pain, their struggle, their, you know.
And what are they feeling, Bishop? What are the pain of your congregations and your parishioners? What are they going through? What are they seeing? What are you experiencing when you visit?
When we started, we committed to buying a house and owning property and putting money away, which is part of our culture. We still do that. But we have young couples now, married 2-3 years, no jobs, basically dealers, entrepreneurs, trading here, buying, selling, cross-border, taking those few profits and building their house. And to see them doing that, you know, trying to find a school for their kids, driving on awful roads, has been very painful and very difficult.
What has that done to you?
It's been very painful because now I have to keep on preaching messages of hope. I've tracked 2010 to 2020, my crossover service messages, which have been very concerning because I've been saying, next year is your year, it's your breakthrough year, the doors are opening. And so 2020 was very difficult. 2019, preaching that message was very difficult because I don't want to be known for empty promises. We have to keep on being optimistic. And people actually take that message and anchor their life and their future around that message. And I'm so scared that I'm giving people promises and hopes that may not be realized or will take longer to realize. And we're saying, no, Bishop said it's going to be all right. We won't go to South. We won't go to New Zealand. Let's remain here. Let's build the house. Let's find the school. And so now I've become really human, very sensitive. I'm touched by the feelings of people's infirmities. And my prayers are more, God, please help this country. And more help Africa. At the Council of African Apostles, which is a group of people I lead, all of us have had this real conversation as Africans. You know, let's continue to be hopeful, but let's now anchor our gospel around salvation and a culture of prosperity, not salvation equals prosperity. They're two separate things, because a lot of times people have come to church and equating their salvation, relation with Jesus Christ, and prosperity. They're two separate things.
Yeah. I call it microwave Christianity. I get born again today, and because the bishop has said, this is my year, I expect by the end of the year to have prospered. I mean, I haven't prospered, Bishop. What do you say to me? You told me this is my year.
And so we're now moving around what actually pleases God. And what pleases God is, without faith, it is impossible to please God. So when a person asks God to increase their faith, that's Luke 17 verse 5, increase my faith. The minute you ask your God to increase your faith, you've asked for an impossible task. Impossible. So when we preach a message of faith that your breakthrough is coming, that faith is going to be tested. Because the just live by faith, and your faith is going to be tested. And so we're trying to balance the message. We cannot, if you look at the Martin Luther Renaissance time when he said the just shall live by faith, and nailed that thesis on the cathedral door, and Europe came to an awakening. That awakening came with a certain quality of life and prosperity. So for me, I'd like our message, including prosperity, to be quality of life. Water that actually works, electricity that's actually delivered, schools that have good teachers, exercise books that are actually there, a pipeline that kids will go to high school and to a university that actually has quality professors, where there's money available for entrepreneurs. And so we're trying to develop and perfect that pipeline alongside a message of faith and prosperity.
But how do you do that to continue preaching a message of hope and encouragement in this destitution, in this poverty that people are drowning in? How do you do that?
It's mandatory because where we are, I've been in ministry since 1974, which is 30-some years, almost 40-some years. If we don't stand, the person that just gets born again next week will fall yoga. It's like, if these guys can't stand, how are we going to stand? So it is a responsibility to keep on preaching that hope and hawking that hope. We look at dramatic testimonies in countries like Ghana, Tanzania, Ethiopia, where Christians have gone through worse in terms of war and struggles and pain, and they've made it. So we anchor our faith with those, and we've agreed collectively that we must preach the message of hope. It is responsible to do that every Sunday, because if we don't teach that and preach that, people will not be able to stand.
Bishop, I'm as Zimbabwean is going through what they're going through right now, and hearing you saying this, and some of them asking, but where is God?
A lot of what we are in is in the realm of what I call human will. There's a message I preached some years ago, the 5 wills that affect every human being. The will of God, the demonic will, and then there's the individual's will. Human will in this world is more powerful than the will of God. Do not, for example, he says, do not eat of that fruit. That's my will. Human will affected by demonic will. Adam and Eve ate of that fruit, and that will has affected all of us. My dad's will affected me to go to the bush and put me in a school. And so other people's will affects our will, but ultimately I have to make a choice and a decision. And so my will then must be based on God's moral standing, God's commandments, God's requisites for us. And then there's corporate will. Genesis 11 verse 6, collectively we choose. And so God is there. As a people we pray, we ask God to intervene. We shouldn't pray that God would kill certain people, even though we might wish they would just get away and let our lives improve. But again, we are in the realm of human will. It's said that we get the government we deserve. I don't think we deserve this one we have. People have made their choice. It's the people's choice. At the next election round, they'll make another choice. Hopefully, we'll get better results in terms of giving more back to the people, quality of life, hope, and so on. But again, God is there. He will answer prayer. Sometimes like the widow that said, avenge me of mine adversary, Luke 18, and the guy that's knocking for bread at midnight 3 times. We have to have importunity, keep on praying, keep on believing, and keep on believing that God is there.
How you say we don't deserve this government? You just unpack that for me.
Well, around elections, and that's around Africa, we're seeing this with the USA. I got up early this morning, earlier than normal, to watch the debates, the Democratic candidates' debates. And they're throwing out all kinds of trinkets and health care, free health care. And so in countries, it's, I'll give you a Fanta, I'll give you a mealy meal, I'll build you a clinic, I'll get you a school if you vote for me. And so again, we are conned into voting for a certain individual, and government leaders around the world don't carry out their promises. And so on and so forth. We believe that it's going to get better. We believe that we're going to get the clinic. We just had a Fanta or a Coke or whatever the case might be, and we believe, and then we vote for a certain individual, and we then deserve the people we vote for because we voted for them.
But this happens all over. What should we do? This happens, rather, it's cyclical. We're going to have another election in 2023. What do we do, Bishop?
There has to be, for me, 3 basic things, and I'm not sure it's even permitted in this country. I'll have to do my research on it. But there has to be voter education. Who you're voting for. Number 2, the church has to begin to support candidates, and remind those of their responsibilities. And number 3, we have what we're starting, TAP, which is training politicians. We're starting from when they're small all the way up. We're calling it this is politics. And with that particular teaching, we're training leaders what their responsibilities are to the nation, to their constituency, and to their church. And so there has to be training. And again, it's a long-term goal. Immediately, I'm not sure we're going to get the kinds of results. Generally, when you have strong one-party states in a semi-multi-party system, the dominant party is going to rule and dictate. Zimbabwe is tricky because of the military and stuff like that. But again, the citizens must know what their rights are and must be able to make demands on those rights.
There are some who say the church should stay out of politics. What's your view?
It's not really possible. I think the church needs to speak, especially when there's injustice, human rights violations, violence and stuff like that. The church, and I'm speaking about within the structures, Zimbabwe Council of Churches, the College of Bishops, Evangelical Fellowship. I'm not considered the church. I'm a leader in the church. I can make a public statement that shouldn't be in contravention of what the Zimbabwe Council of Churches is saying or the Evangelical Fellowship of Zimbabwe, because then we can maybe inhibit processes that we don't know of that are happening under cover, really. For me, I do speak, not making a public statement usually. It's more speaking to political leaders privately. I would say Nicodemously, coming at night, and challenging some things. If there is blatant violence and police brutality, which we experience on our route, I have to say something.
Yes.
And I cannot be silent. I have to say something. And it's not to agitate or create a platform for a political agenda. In fact, 3 weeks ago, the police were again beating people right outside church on a Sunday morning. And I came down and challenged the guys for doing that. They actually wanted to walk through our property. I said, you can't do that. So right now, a couple of pastors on staff have gone to meet the officer commanding Harare and spoke to them about those kinds of things. We've seen less since then, but there's still areas of where we see blatant police brutality. We've experienced that outside our church, 55 Kwame Nkrumah. Wednesdays, we've had people running off the street, coming into church, and police have actually come into the building to harass and beat people. And so we've challenged that. If there are miscreants and individuals that are misbehaving, I do understand that, but we need a bit of a heads up. And if we are going to the international community and we're asking for sanctions to be lifted, and we're wanting to be received in the international community, those pictures don't make it easy. It makes it even worse, of people being beaten and so on. That's not normal in a normal society.
If you had an opportunity to be in a room with President Emmerson Mnangagwa and Nelson Chamisa, what message would you say to them?
Impromptu, it would be Zimbabwe is greater than any political party. It's not that I love Rome less or Caesar less. It's that I love Rome more. You have your politics. Zimbabwe is greater than your political party. Our future is greater than the existence of your political party. So let's deal with the common ground. Number one, peace at all costs. We have to have peace. We have to create an environment. In my view, government's responsibility is to create an environment for good economics, for entrepreneurs, for money to flow in and out. Government's responsibility is to make sure that people have quality of life. We can't expend quality of life against a political party. We have to deal with corruption on the highest level. We have to have open transparency. We have to have a Singapore-type transparency. People have to disclose before they come into power their assets and then give an account of why and how they've earned money to gain certain assets. Corruption is an area that has to be dealt with openly and transparently. And that's from pastors to political leaders. And those are things that they have to stand together in as vested interests in the nation.
The love of Zimbabwe.
It's greater than personal gain.
You preached at one time, you used to preach at one time, wearing the Zimbabwean flag around your wrist. What is that signifying?
Leading up to 97, when the land acquisition deal began and land grab began and there was lots of violence, Zimbabwe was like going up in smoke. We were praying hard for Zimbabwe. Cindy Jacobs had prophesied Zimbabwe was the breadbasket and of Africa and so on. And so as a tool for intercession, I began to wear the flag and try to get people everywhere I preached on the major platforms. You know, they would ask, what is that? I'd say, we're praying for Zimbabwe. It was a tool for intercession. And I wore that flag for probably 12 years, just praying and praying and praying, leading up to 2013 elections. After those elections, I kind of like took the flag off again.
Why?
I felt that that particular job was done in terms of intercession. And I also felt like I became known for wearing a flag and not for a message of empowerment, not for kingdom unity. I didn't want to be labeled as an individual wearing a flag. So people still ask me, why don't I wear a flag anymore? What's gone wrong? What's different? I feel the kingdom agenda is greater, unity is greater. Africa as a continent is greater than a single flag. So that's one of the reasons why, the main reason why I stopped wearing the flag.
You emphasize the issue of unity is greater. But right now, as a nation, we're so polarized, Bishop. What would be your message to Zimbabweans around that?
It's not simple. There's going to be polarization. There's going to be preference. Most political parties, in this case, from 1978, 78 into 1980, grassroots politics, guys were getting grassroots going down there. And so I said many years ago that the concept of Mugabe was greater than Mugabe. Because in the rural areas, you'd mention his name, he was literally a god, really. And it would be unthinkable to vote for somebody else because of who he was and what he did. And they did the grassroots work. The late great did some phenomenal things, and those won't be forgotten, shouldn't be. And so in South Africa, you have ANC is greater than the other parties because of what Mandela and Oliver Tambo before him did, etc., what those individuals did, those that went through Fort Hare University, etc. It's very difficult not to be polarized. And so now when you have a new political party in terms of political journey, the MDC, for example, the face was Tsvangirai versus President Mugabe. And what MDC stood for and what ZANU-PF stands for, there's definitely polarization. They have their colors, they wear their red berets, their red colors, ZANU-PF has theirs. And unfortunately, we still have polarization. What we have to grow is we have to grow into maturity, where we respect a person's views, we respect a person's opinion. Chicha and I are so different. We're 38 years married. I eat hard eggs. She loves soft eggs. I get up, struggle to get up in the morning. I'm still grumpy. She's an AM person. I can stay up all night. She's an Arsenal supporter.
You are a Liverpool supporter.
I'm sleeping with the enemy. But again, with our differences, God made a tree. And in that single tree, a robin, a crow, a canary can dance their song, wear their colors, and celebrate. Zimbabwe is a big tree. All the birds and expressions can have their expression in that tree. And we must respect each other's views, each other's opinions. If they violate cardinal laws from sovereign to human rights, definitely. But other than that, we must respect each other. We must honor each other. You know, we can't have a police state where CIO guys come in and monitor what somebody's saying in the church service. And if you speak against bond notes, you marked a certain way. That's ridiculous. We have to have these freedoms and be free without insulting somebody. I need to be free to express my opinion.
You are passionate about developing leadership. What do you say to somebody who says we are exactly where we are right now because of a deficit in leadership within the church, within politics, within the boardrooms? What would be your view?
I think futuristic leadership needs to be built around vision. Without vision, people perish. And so you can have somebody have a vision. Samuel, the book of Samuel says, in that day, the word of God was scarce and there was no open vision. Eli was the leader. He had no vision. His sons Hophni and Phinehas were leaders. They had no vision. And so God trusted a national agenda to a 9-year-old boy, Samuel. God called his name 3 times, and God gave him the national agenda, firstly spiritually, economically, politically, and that national agenda grew with Samuel. And God promised him, your words will not fall to the ground. And so for us in Africa, we need to clarify what our vision is. We are too broad brush. You know, what the AU is talking about in Addis is very broad brush. We're very short on details. So we have the late great Moyes, the Julius Nyerere's, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Robert Mugabe's, Nkomo's, so on. Those were all broad brush leaders. What we need now are leaders that can work out the details. So that clear vision must now have leaders that can function specifically in particular areas to deliver. Leadership training is not leading with people following. Leadership is actually identifying and bringing direction. And so there is leadership, for example, if I'm driving on a road, it's like the other night visiting a family, I asked them what road I was on. They said to me, you're on the wrong road. So yes, I was on the wrong road. They identified I was wrong, but they couldn't tell me which way to go. And so what we need is, don't tell me I'm on the wrong road. Give me directions to find the right road. And so we need those kinds of leaders to emerge. And unfortunately, on our continent, the minute somebody emerges, even in churches, when somebody emerges with that kind of potential leadership, we try to stifle them and bring them down instead of encourage them
to grow
and express themselves.
You have been tested as a leader and as a person. Your very touching story of your youngest son, Bernstein. How is he doing, by the way?
Well, he was with me this morning, coming to celebrate with us our anniversary.
Describe to us what Bernstein is going through.
Yes, we have 4 sons. Bernstein was born in 93. I hope I got that right. We discovered in April of 1993 that Bernstein had a severe heart condition. We were preaching for my dad at his conference over Easter, and Bernstein's nose had thick green mucus. His chest was very bad. And so Chichi and my dad rushed him to the emergencies in Bulayo. And the doctor there said, your son, to Chichi, your son has a severe heart condition. She said, no, he's just got a bad cold. He said, no, I can hear it. There's a murmur. But also his fingers are clubbed and his toenails are clubbed. We then were referred to Dr. Bannerman and then discovered Bernie was born with a hole in his heart that could not be mended. But the tragedy was that he was born without a pulmonary artery. And off his aorta are now collateral vessels, which are veins coming off that plug everywhere on his lungs. And we were told your son will not live to the age of 12.
He's now 26.
26. When he was 18, along with his challenge, he had a mental breakdown. And his dream patterns, his memory was totally erased.
What has that done to you in terms of your faith? What has that done to you?
We had to categorize Jehovah Rapha, that God is a healer, because God does heal. And he continues to heal. We've seen miracles in our church in many places where God has healed others. We've seen miracles dance around our son. The only issue I have, Trevor, with that is that our son, if this is a test for me, if I'm paying for the international ministry I have, in my view, and I fight with the old men all the time, including this morning, it shouldn't be at my expense. I mean, it should be at my expense,
Not at
his
Jen's
expense. I've discovered many phenomenal leaders have similar challenges, and so we're now dealing with the, we don't want to become toxic, because I can't speak out of a heart that's toxic. I don't want to have toxicity and have vengeful attitudes. I want to try to stay pure and be touched with other people's feelings. In fact, when we took Bernstein last year to meet Dr. Bannerman, Dr. Bannerman said to me, he said, you know what, Bishop, he said, I thought your son had the worst heart condition I'd ever seen. He said, these kids I'm seeing now are going to need you because their child has actually a hollow heart. This child may not live.
What has this journey taught you, Bishop, about you?
Well, firstly, that no human being is a god. We're very quick as human beings to make people gods.
It has humbled you?
Well, it's broken me. It's given me a contrite heart. It's made me more human, more approachable. It's made me become more sensitive to other people's needs, that the person next door probably has a greater struggle than I do. It's made me fearful because we have grandchildren coming up. I don't want my sons and daughter-in-laws to have challenges we've had. My sister Shirley is still, she's now in her 50s, still having a challenge. My mom, who's 85, in 2 weeks, still watches over Shirley, who's 55. And that was my greatest fear, that we'd have a situation like that. I just pray that individuals that have challenges like that will continue to have confidence in God, that God knows what he's doing, that he's perfecting something in the future, whatever it might be.
Has it brought the family together, or
It has.
dissension?
It's brought us together. We still celebrate and work with our differences, but we have now come towards common ground. We've done that for years around Bernie, to talk and to enjoy each other more and appreciative of each other more. A friend of ours lost their son the early part of January. He was killed in an accident. Just came out of university from Cyprus going to Cape Town, came home for a few days, was killed in an accident. And I've known that family. They were part of my dad's church from 1974. And I wept with them, I wept for them, but I cried because I just felt they gave their son, we still have ours. Very difficult moment.
Difficult moment.
Yeah, very, very difficult moment.
We pray for Bernstein's recovery and comfort. But God continues to bless you. God has given you an amazing network. You've built amazing relationships all over the world, on the continent, in America. Speak to me about that. I mean, T.D. Jakes, one of my favorite pastors, is a close friend of yours. Talk to me about that network and what it's done for you.
Again, a lot of what we've done, we've just been in the right place at the right time. When our church began to grow, the way that started was we began to support pastors, give them allowances every month, the organization I was a part of was against us doing that. They said we are creating a welfare system where people are going to be trusting in the welfare and not living by faith. Well, I couldn't correlate that in my head. And so as we started supporting pastors, we then started planting churches, and our ministry began to grow throughout Zimbabwe. At that time, my international ministry in terms of a public platform began. I got onto TBN almost by accident. The guys that were leading TBN, Praise and Worship, came out of the same church that the missionaries that converted us to Christ came from. We discovered that at a conference I was preaching, they were leading Praise and Worship, and over lunch we discovered that. They then said to me, would you like to come on TBN? Didn't know what that was. They explained it to me. I then said, okay, I'll come on TBN. My driver had a company that was a telephone company. He gave me a 1-800 number, printed me a card, said, you're going to need a name for this ministry. I said, well, we New Life Ministries. He said, that's too common. I'd written a song entitled Jabula in 1988. My sister Bernie said, why don't you take Jabula? Mike then developed the font. He said, you need something in bright red to be striking, you know. And there's a bit of humor around that, and so that's how that began. And when I went on TBN, I was told, you know, you got a good message, you African. The only African that was known at that time was Benson Idayosa. And so I was told that if certain people come, including Bishop Jakes, Benny and Rod Parsley, if they are available, we bump you off.
Off TBN?
Off TBN the night, you know, because they were doing revival services and they'll come on. And I was fine with it. And so one of those nights, it was a Thursday night, Bishop Jakes was available, and I was going to be preaching on the Friday. I did Wednesday, and I was going to do Friday. And so that's how I met Bishop Jakes. And we talked a little bit. Of course, he was rising. My name was seen around his, especially around a magazine called Charisma Magazine. And he did his homework, and that's how he invited me. But then, because we were planting churches and starting churches around the world, we had to have a name, which was Jabula New Life Ministry International. We then started to organize these churches into national structures, which are now in over 30 nations.
Wow.
I don't lead Jabula. We have an international presiding bishop that leads Jabula. I'm just like the president of the organization, a figurehead. Hopefully we'll enjoy some benefits from that, you know. But again, we just opened Venezuela,
Wow.
Chile,
Wow.
we're in Dominican Republic. So we have a Spanish expression. I'm going there in the later part of this year because they want to meet Papa, you know, which is quite interesting and striking.
An amazing journey and an amazing story. You busy. You don't sleep enough.
True.
How do you exercise at all?
Well, I run. I try when I'm on the road. I run every morning because I get up early, so I run every morning. I try to do a minimum of 10 Ks. When I'm in Zimbabwe, I'm running weekends because it's not possible to run during the day, you know. And so weekends and public holidays, I get that run in. Try to keep my weight down, eat properly. I've been the same weight for the last 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Which is 67. I've dropped a bit of weight because of the fasting program, but I'm around about 67. I don't do sugar. I don't do fizzy drinks. I don't do desserts. I don't eat after 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
I don't. Because you can't keep the kind of schedule dragging all of that around. You know, picked up a bit of a blood pressure issue some time ago. And so, but monitoring all of that. So I would really advise people to stay fit because your best years come in your late 50s into your early 60s. And so you don't want to be sick and unhealthy when you got your best years, you know. And so basically exercise is important. I don't do gym. I just struggle trying to.
And do you get time to, apart from reading the Bible, do you get time to read anything else?
I do.
You do. Do you mind sharing with us the books you're reading? The people that watch this show love books. What books have made an impact on you?
I strongly and highly recommend Alistair Campbell's book, Winners. It's probably the most powerful book on leadership I've read. Alistair Campbell was working with Tony Blair for years. And he's interviewed the top 1% of the greatest leaders of all time. Of course, in the 20th and 21st century, including Queen of England. Tiger Woods is in there. You know, why they succeed. And he tells in that book, every person that succeeded, mentions the Beatles out of Liverpool. If a person puts 10,000 hours into something, which is 8 hours a day, for a minimum of 10 years, you are guaranteed success. Bill Gates is in that deal. And so what that did for me, reading Winners, Why They Win, it helped me develop a culture. It's a culture of winning. It's a discipline of things that has to be done. So with my prayer that I put in the late 80s, 90s, nobody was calling me. Nobody was asking me to preach. I had nothing to do. So I prayed 8 hours a day and spent tons of hours in my Bible, from Genesis all the way. And so in January, I did the Old Testament through. I've gone through the Bible already twice this year on audio, fast speed. Because if you put the time in, the returns come. And so I would encourage guys, Winners is a really, really great book. Sam Chand, who writes on leadership, he does stuff on holding your ladder. Anything by Sam Chand is great. But, I mean, Maxwell is a no-brainer. You know, it's a phenomenal read and a great book. And for me, one of the greatest books of all time, which I read 3 times a year, is by George Clason, The Richest Man in Babylon.
Wow.
7 Cures for a Lean Purse, chapter number 5, I believe. It is a phenomenal book. Taught me how to save money. We put money away every month. 18% of all of our income.
You put away.
We put away in our businesses, in our ministry, and in our lives. I strongly recommend The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason.
Wow. A man who reads so much, a man who's wise like this, how do you get to support Liverpool?
Well, it's, you never
I'm an Arsenal supporter, so,
whatever.
you know, I'm offended that you are a Liverpool
Whatever.
supporter. You're going to win the league, it looks like.
Well, on the 25th of April this year, I'm going to Anfield. It's the second last game at Anfield. We definitely will win the league. What Jurgen Klopp has done, he's brought a culture which is playing for the badge. Alex Ferguson did that with Man United. You're not playing for a salary, you're playing for the badge. The badge is greater than the salary. And so I think Klopp has done that now. He's built a phenomenal team. What he has done is he's succeeded in building the spine. Goalkeeper, midfields, and striker. Everything else is peripheral. And for anything you do, you must have a reliable spine. And so Liverpool's having a good patch. It looks like if he continues in this way, it will be several seasons they could be in that mode. Other teams are now going back to building, rebuilding, and so on. And so it's a season as Liverpool supporters we want to enjoy and should enjoy. Fortunately, I'm not being tormented by Man United supporters. You know.
As an Arsenal supporter, it pains me to say we wish you the best as Liverpool.
Thank you, Gunners. Thank you.
Bishop Tudor Bismark, what a pleasure it's been talking to you. And what an inspiration your journey has been. We pray for Ben Sten's comfort and recovery. And we hope Liverpool does lift the cup as Arsenal supporters. So thank you for coming,
Thank you.
busy as you are. Let me turn to our audience back at home, on the continent, in the diaspora. We thank you for watching In Conversation with Trevor, which is a weekly show. We invite you to press this little subscribe button so that you don't miss out on this amazing conversation that we're having with great people. So until next time, cheers.